Hello?
Hello, this is Lieutenant Feeney at the Sheriff's Office. How are you?
Hello, it's a pleasure to speak with you. I'm doing all right.
Good. I had a message to give this number a call. I don't know if there was a name or not. I apologize.
No, it's okay. You can basically just, I'm just an individual, like, I'm just a private, you know what I mean? I'm just an American. We'll put it that way. I'm an American
Okay.
that is actually...
What should I call you, sir?
Well, the name that's given to me, you can call me Seneca. That's my first name. I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm going to be transparent with you.
Sure.
That's my real name. Yep. And I'm just going to go ahead and start off. And, I'm going to start off with, I have a lot of respect for law enforcement. What was your name again, sir?
Andrew Feeney.
Andrew Feeney. It's a pleasure, seriously. So...
You as well.
I've gone through a lot of stuff in my life, as we all have. I have stories. We all have stories. And my journey brought me to the attention of law. Ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to be a law enforcement officer, but I also had a problem with some of the school systems and authority and certain things. But moving forward, I was going to go be a game warden, but I was going to be a police officer, and I felt like the more that I was around people that kind of didn't appreciate the law, were drunk all the time or violent, I felt like it would destroy my faith in humanity. So I wanted to be a game warden. Well, it turns out you have to be a police officer in order to be a game warden, 5 years. So I was like, oh, this is crazy. My teacher in school was an internal affairs agent, and she even told me that, I was like, I didn't understand that sometimes the police need to police the police. And my friend hung himself during the time that I was in college. It kind of steered me in a different direction. I ended up with another sales company traveling the country following storms, and I ended up working beside insurance companies, and I actually did so good that I got filed with some falsified charges of public injustice fraud and insurance fraud. For 2 years, I beat the case. That's what opened up my eyes to the law. I said, in trial, so you guys are trying to bribe me? And they're like, you can't say that. And I was like, what do you mean? I didn't do anything wrong. My story's never changed. I'm going to tell the jury. And they were like, 5 minutes later, they literally dropped the charges. And I was like, something's wrong here. So then...
Yeah, wow.
I know. So then I wanted to know what was really wrong with our country. It wasn't necessarily the law. I felt like there was someone to blame. I didn't realize it was really the people themselves. So, but long story short, I started this whole entire rabbit hole. I thank God, honestly, whether you want to believe him or not. So then it let me know that there's two Americas, two people, all these different jurisdictions between the de jure and the de facto. Well, again, I respect the law and all these things. But as I progressed forward and I realized that really, it's the people that are the government. We are the ones that elect people, and then we kind of go to sleep. We think our job is just our job. And then again, we have public servants and law enforcement officers, and I get it that, there's murderers out there, rapists, there's people that are robbing people. There's a need for police officers. I'm definitely sure of this. But I definitely feel like when somebody says, what is the job description of a police officer, okay? And then you go online, and then you go on the website, all right? And then let's say I'm a free, now, I learned that there's a thing called a secured party creditor. A secured party creditor fills out a UCC-1 financing statement. He realizes that America has been bankrupt since 1933. They created the birth certificate and the social security number and a fictitious legal entity. It's not real. And then you have you, which is the born American, which is a creditor to your nation. I mean, makes sense, right? You're born here. Your rights are protected. Your government is there for you. This is what it's supposed to be all about. So then,
Right.
As a secured party creditor, you don't realize that there's a name attached to your birth certificate, which is how the state, which is attached to the Washington District of Columbia, that is also enacting policies, and because we're bankrupt, and it makes sense. Well, I don't want to be dictated by my own government if it's repugnant to the Constitution. Does this make sense? And so my belief is that in order to be a police officer right away, your job description, like I believe, is to swear an oath to protect and serve the Constitution, right?
Right.
So what constitution is that? Is that the United States Constitution, and is that the 1820 Constitution, or is that the legislative Constitution?
Good question.
I know. And I'm actually been studying the Title 29A, and I know that a driver is a commercial activity, but it says it falls under operator. So it says I'm looking up. So because it says 29A, a driver, has the same meaning as an operator as defined in subsection 48. So then I'm going all the way down. You got horseless carriage. Now again, I'm not trying to alleviate anything. And then so what I mean by alleviate is I don't believe I'm above the law, okay? But what I do know is that as somebody who contracted into something, then that's where they're subject and liable to it. But if I didn't contract with you, then therefore I'm not conducting any kind of commercial activity. Which I know this is crazy, and I'm not trying to cause war with anybody, but an operator means an individual who drives or is in control of a vehicle. And then one of the things it says is a person. A person is an individual, a corporation, a firm, a partnership, a joint venture, association, fiduciary, trust, estate, or any legal or commercial entity. So then when you go into a license, it says license means an operator's license, a driver's license, or other license, permit. So there's permission. It means not right. So now you're getting permission or privilege to operate a motor vehicle. And then license includes but is not limited to a non-resident operating privilege and the privilege of a person to apply for and obtain a license and a permit to operate a motor vehicle. So again, I'm not, because then that's what this one officer that I asked today, what was the description? And I said, if I'm operating my private automobile, which under the Supreme Court says is a household item, and that by all rights I have right to travel unmolested on the roadways or highways that are also created for commercial activity, and that a police officer is to actually regulate commercial activity and to protect and serve the rights of the American people or the people of the nation. So when it goes back to section 20, it's section 2 of the Constitution of Maine in 1820, it says all power is inherent in the people, all free governments are founded in their authority and instituted for their benefit. And they have therefore an unalienable and indefeasible right to institute government and to alter, reform, and totally change the same when their safety and happiness requires it. Well, I'm not saying, I've seen and heard stories of police officers when they go to enforce their rights, they will become violent. They'll try to rip people out. They'll steal their property. So then I'm like, all right, I'm confused. And then a police officer say, well, I'm just doing my job. So then I'm wondering, is the law, do they work for the state? Is the state statutes law or is the Constitution law? And then it goes like this. In 1820, it says section 11, the legislator shall pass no bill of attainder, ex post facto law, nor law impairing the obligation of contracts, which that's good. That means that I have a right to contract with the state. And if I'm contracting driving, that means that I am obligated now to be regulated under all commercial activity. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because Maine it's one of the founding states of really the first colonies. And it used to be Massachusetts. And it also was attached to Canada and Newfoundland. And then they fought for individual chartership to be Maine, what it is today. And to me, when I look at its heritage, and I actually am Abenaki Native American, so when I look at preserving that and then looking at the times that we're living in now, it's like, do we have officers that are working and will protect the Constitution? Or would they, if they start making laws tomorrow to lock people up for anything more, like for the most arbitrary things, will the police officers defend the people? Will they say, you know what, we're not enforcing those laws? That's ridiculous. So like, I have a respect that if I'm going to conduct commercial activity, which means I'm collecting money, I'm at a for-hire capacity, and transportation falls into the same definitions. and this is recognized under USC 1831-9, motor vehicle defined there, and a USC 1831 commercial purposes. So there is commercial purposes necessary, but then there's the secured party or the secured rights recognized under USC 18.2. That
So just so I'm staying with you, sir. Sorry to cut you off.
Yes.
Basically, the argument is
there's no argument.
Commercial purposes, or what you're telling me is kind of via the Constitution, without any commercial purposes to your travel, you should be free to travel with your private vehicle without registration, insurance, and a driver's license.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
If I'm respecting all the laws of the law of the land, respecting all of peace and all things, and because rights are derived from property. If you don't have property, you don't have rights, and that'll be found in the Fifth Amendment. You'll find it in the 14th Amendment, and in the Declaration of Independence. It says we have a right to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, and happiness was put in there. It used to say property, but they knew that you can't have property, a happiness without property. Like, would you believe that you own your own body right now?
I hope so.
Congratulations. Okay? So you totally are in full right of the God-given estate of Andrew. So this is your true domicile, the human domain. And so within that ownership is your own rights that then are granted above that. So and then if you read the law, it says that a right can't be converted into a crime unless you consent. That's also in the Declaration of Independence, is that governments are instituted among men, and I usually have it right in front of me, and I'm kind of being put on the spot. But basically, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men from the just of the consent of the governed. So we consent to be governed, and then and don't get me wrong, I understand that sometimes they need force, but I think that coercion through intimidation and force is not a good way to get consent, but it works for some people. So it does not work for me. I'll go to jail. You can kill me. I don't care. I'll die for freedom. I'll die for my conscience. I'll die for you. I'll die for my rights. I'll die for this country and my children, and then my children's children's children. And I'll fight for them.
Is there something beyond the driver's license traveling thing that you're trying to...
Well,
obviously just everything you're saying.
I'm a state national. I'm going through every single process to operate under the law with the recognition with the state secretary. And I am a part of the National Assembly, and I was riding with somebody who now hung himself, so that's irrelevant. And his case doesn't matter. Wow. His situation doesn't matter. But
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's terrible. Okay. But he got pulled over, and he then, because his vehicle or automobile was not registered, the state trooper, the guy could have been somewhere else, the state trooper. He could have been doing something else besides what he did. But and then when he declared his identity and reserving all rights, he did not care. He violated all the rights. And I was like, wow, this is really scary. Now I know why nobody believes in the Constitution around here. So I pulled out my video camera and I, assessed the whole entire situation. And again, ever since 2012, 2013, I've been studying the law. This is diligently my life. This is my passion. So
what did the legislators say when you go to them with this?
Well,
the lawmakers. No.
Whenever a legislator passes a law, it's up to the law enforcement officer to either enforce that statute based off the premise of asking questions of, like, let's say, whenever you pull me over, everything that I do say can and will be used against me in the court of law. So they create the state driver's license. You ask for the driver's license. There's the proof that I'm conducting commercial activity. If you do not know the law, then you are not protected by anything. You are then operating under implied tacit consent, which means that you as an officer have every right to pull that person over and assume and imply that he is conducting commercial activity, because that is another side to me of the job description of an officer. Because in 1871, we went to the Civil War. And that means that we no longer had a lawful government recognized under Congress anymore. Abraham Lincoln created a separate form of government under General Orders 100 and the Lieber Code, creating a military form of government. That was one of the questions that I was going to ask you. Is the police department
in 1871 we went to war?
Yep, 1871. 1865 is when it started, and then 1871 is when they created the Act of 1871. You talk to any lawyer. I wish I recorded the conversation. I didn't. But he told me everything I needed to know. I couldn't even believe it. I was
how
like,
do you get this ultimately made common practice throughout the state? Obviously, calling individual officers.
Yep, I'm doing it right now. This is the only way.
This isn't really the way to be success. I think you need to go bigger, to the legislator or what have you. Asking every individual officer not to enforce Maine's traffic laws it's going to be a long battle for you. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you know what? It starts right here, Andrew. This is it. This is me being a real American to an American, that you take that badge off either way, you are protected by the same rights that you enforce. So let me finish what I was saying, because in 1871, a lot of people are not aware that when America first started, we fought off the British and we borrowed money from European bankers to start the colonies and do all these things. So that was the first original 13 colonies. Well, in 1871, we had 34 republics. So that means that we had other land that now wasn't attached to the original Louisiana Purchase and these original purchases of the colonies. So when the European bankers came to Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't really over race of slavery, because slaves were really technically property. And what that meant was the United States, the continental United States of America, each state was its own nation state under the Articles of Confederation, and that means that we all governed our own self under a Bill of Rights. And each state, it had its own constitution. And then in 1871, what ended up happening is that the European bankers wanted more money and more land. So they did a collateralization of the lands, and Abraham Lincoln, in order to preserve the Union, which is the actual America that this whole entire country was first founded upon, he created the Emancipation Proclamation Act, the act, which made anybody that was now a slave could now become a U.S. citizen. So now what that created was the 13th and 14th Amendment citizen, the 14th Amendment citizen. Because never ever before was there really a citizen. You were an American, a part of the nation that you were born in. Well, I was born in Massachusetts, but I came up here when I was 9. I went back to Mass. We don't resonate. Okay, I'm a Mainer. It doesn't matter. I'm a Mainer. All right, I love Maine. So this is where I pledge my allegiance of the state as a national, a part of the Maine Assembly. You can go ahead and look into it. They're dealing with stuff, but they'll free you. And then so what happens is now I'm no longer a 14th Amendment attached to Washington District of Columbia of the 9th District, which created the separate form of a United States. There's two Americas. There's one that's attached to the Washington District of Columbia, which is the federal government, but then you have the state. And that's why marijuana is legal in the state of Maine, but not legal in the federal zone. Does this make sense?
Sure.
So now that means that there's the all capital letters state of Maine, but then there's the Maine Republic. So what people are doing is, by the graces of God, waking up to the real reality that, well, we are actually the government. We need to start holding officials accountable without... So when I was looking at the police officer, I have a thing where I realize you are me and I am you. So when I looked at the police officer, I realized, well, I got to respect your authority if I ever want you to respect mine. So the people have lost their own recognition of their own power. And so it's all in the hands of the police officers. And so legislation, which is not the state of Maine, now, don't get me wrong, the people... Right now, whenever they go and try to hold accountable the government, they're being met with force. The feds are coming down on them. So it's up to the state and its people to start one at a time being like, okay, how do I address somebody? Because I would write this down. There is the USC 18, Title 1, Chapter 13, 241, 242. That's conspiracy to go against rights under color of law, deprivation of rights under color of law. 42 USC 1983 is a civil lawsuit under color of law. So the color of law is where the police get to operate under. And then that's where they get to enforce the statutes, policies, and ordinances. But if nobody knows this stuff, they're not protected by it. So what I would do is try to educate police and also the self on, because, I mean, I want my people to be free. But if they choose not to listen to me, I call it the religion of Babylon. Then you're a federal citizen. You chose to be. I'm not going to fight you. Arguing is irrelevant. It's obnoxious. But if somebody's willing to have a real conversation with you and want to really actually listen to the real duties of what it means to be an American, then you can't make war with your officials. You are the guy. You can't make war with yourself. The only one you're angry at is yourself. I know this is really complex stuff, but I'm getting a motorhome. I'm a natural citizen. I'm going to be traveling back and forth. I'm going to be operating under the law. And whenever I get met, especially in my home nation state, the last thing I want to do is be ripped out. Somebody steals my property without due process of law and doesn't recognize the actual Constitution, which then makes me beg to differ and ask the question, what is the law description of a police officer? And do they really respect the rights?
I'm following you. Just do any rules apply? Does safety rules apply to your personal vehicle you're driving, or can it be? Is there any regulations there that you think should be followed?
Well, who are you protecting? Are you protecting the state, or are you protecting the people? So if I'm operating at a safe capacity,
the other people on the roadway, if you're driving an unsafe vehicle.
That's a great question, because I was in an organization where I was in a meeting with a whole bunch of assembly workers, and they were asking me, should we follow the speed limit? And I was like, yes. They're all there for your safety. Everything there is designed for safety. So but to me, are you subject to where, like, let's say I'm operating and let's say if I was going 5 over, I wasn't exactly sure of the situation. You could turn around and then be like, listen, I'm just going to give you a warning, let you know that we're looking out for you. You can tell whether somebody had the intent of committing a crime, rather than assuming that they're committing a crime. Does this make sense?
Right, well, it does. 5 over wouldn't be a crime anyway. But what about the safety piece? If I see that you've got, no windshield and 4 ball tires,
yes.
Do you think the police have the authority to stop and address that violation, or no?
Well, down in Florida, you actually can take your doors right off and the hood of your vehicle, which I thought was insane. I couldn't even believe my eyeballs. Vehicles that literally, as long as the roof of your truck doesn't touch the telephone pole lines, then you can jack your truck up really high. So this is somebody taking advantage of
individual state laws, though, like as far as safety.
So check this out.
Like those need to be followed.
Maine has a lot of crazy terrain. If you drive down the road of Maine, there's not many rail guards. So that means that you could literally accidentally drive 5 to 8 inches off the roadway and literally be right into the woods. So I think that people should have, they should be maintaining their own tread and tires. Now, if it wasn't for the government letting them trying to be their daddy, do you think people would be maintaining their tires and their stuff like that? No. Then that means that somebody would have to be doing that. But, I mean, again, these are touchy subjects, because I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, I look at my own vehicle, I got the Abraham Lincoln head rule. If I can see his head, then I know I'm in the wrong place. If I can't see his head when I put my dime or my penny inside the grain of the tires, the tread of the tires, then I'm in some danger zone.
This is just kind of my question: is where do you draw the line on what rules you think should be enforced and what laws should be enforced and what should?
No matter what, all is transportation when you're dealing with commercial activity. So when you're pulling somebody over that has a license plate, he's already registered his vehicle over there. So then when you pull him over, The guy or the individual or the private citizen, the civilian, if you will let you know. For the record, officer, I reserve all rights delegated by God and protected by the Constitution. Did you swear an oath to protect and serve the Constitution, officer? Great, so you're a peace officer. Okay, for the record, officer, I'm not engaging in any kind of commercial or transportation use of the highways. Please note that you've been informed. And for the record, any actions commenced against me may be in violation of USC 18, Title 1, Chapter 13, 241, conspiracy to go against my rights in the color of law, and also 242, conspiracy, deprivation of rights under color of law.
And once you make me aware of all that, I see that two of your tires have wire showing. They are unsafe for the roadway.
Oh, man, I didn't know that. I've been extremely busy all week. I've been dealing with stuff with my family. I'm so glad that you let me know that.
So
I'm going to take care of that tomorrow. Man, what is your name?
Everybody says that, and that's unsafe. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
so, I get your point. I just hope you're getting mine a little bit. Does that make sense?
Right now, we're in an economical deprivation. That's why my first question was, is the police department a for-profit corporation? So I think that's where if somebody should sit there and say this, I'm going to give you a warning. If I see you on the streets in 2 weeks, I'm going to pull you over again to see if you took care of the matter.
I promise you, our warnings to summonses are probably 15 to 1. Warnings versus a ticket. Now, and I can back that up. Like we're not just out hitting people. Our guys use a lot of discretion. And,
yeah.
Those are true stats. So as far as the warning and discretion, I get that. My question was to you: do I have the authority in your mind to address those unsafe tires on your vehicle?
I mean, absolutely. You're looking out for not just myself, but everybody else. And again, what if I did not notice it because I was going to work every single day and going to, there's a lot of people, and I'm sure you're aware of it.
Do I risk the other drivers on the road because your oversight? Do I say, yeah, you're all set for a couple of weeks with you, and then if you blow out a tire and you cross the center line?
What's the best judgment of looking at somebody that has threads showing, the vehicle is completely dangerous? Again, did he let you know that he was conducting commercial activity? Is he because anybody who knows what I know, they're trying to respect the law to all degrees. They don't want to violate the law. They want to respect it. And so if somebody's maintaining their own personal property, and I totally agree. I mean, I believe that there is a disturbance of the peace. If you're driving or operating or, let's say, traveling in a private automobile and your exhaust is starting to hit a certain kind of velocity of RPMs or whatever, or hertz towards a sound ratio that becomes completely disturbing to, let's say, the elderly that might be sleeping, or people that might, let's say you work all night long and you sleep all day, then the last thing you want...
Sure. We're going to use discretion with that stuff. My question to you is, so let's say I stop you, right? And you give me everything you just told me. You don't have a driver's license, your vehicle's not registered, etc. But your exhaust is way beyond the restrictions, and you got 4-ball tires showing wire. And I say, sir, I need to, I am going to write you a summons for these issues, or I'm going to, write you a warning, but I need an ID. Per main law, are we going to now turn into a thing where you're going to refuse to provide identification, even though you're acknowledging those issues are legitimate that I should be enforcing?
I mean, I'm acknowledging that within the authority of, let's say, that I'm a private individual that inhabits the territory or the actual republic of Maine.
Yeah, I got all that, and I get it.
And that means that I elected you as a deputy to, to preserve. I mean, if you read the Constitution, it's pretty real. It says that I even have a right now, we do, in Section 19, to truly have this conversation. It says, every person for an injury done in him, in his person, which we define a person as a corporation, reputation of...
I'm on board with you. I'm like, sir, I agree with you 100%. I'm fine that you don't have a driver's license. But you have these issues that I need to address as part of my job as a police officer of public safety.
Again, if somebody's that irresponsible that that's exactly what their tires are looking like, either they're neglecting to maintain their own stuff and there has to be a feasible reason why. And I think, with all due respect, asking somebody like, or taking the inclination of understanding, hey, maybe people, they could have had a baby. Somebody's working all the time. There maybe not be making enough money to be able to take care of these matters, but I'm noticing it as a risk.
We always consider all those things. Let's say I gave him the 2-week notice, right?
Yep.
2 weeks later, I've stopped him. The tires are still bald. He's all over the road. And I'm like, he doesn't want to give me an ID, doesn't have a driver's license.
Then I would issue him his safety citation, which then forces him to have to go to court and deal with that within a judge, of where they look at the implications of the.
Who do I issue it to if he doesn't want to provide an identification or give me a name?
I mean, of the individual, let's say, most of the time, people that are a part of these state assemblies, they carry the identification of some sort that's connected to a sense of a name. So what you're saying is that you need the name to then charge them that's attached to the jurisdiction of the state itself. I see. So how would you be able to charge anybody if there was no name to charge at all, which is attached to the ID itself? Then these are situations where, obviously, what we're basically saying is that you are running into situations of where Americans themselves can't maintain or govern or not take care of their own property. Let's
say they're speeding. Let's take the financial piece out of it. They're driving 20 over the speed limit through a residential area. And I go up and you give me the whole speech, all this stuff. I'm not in commerce. I'm not required to follow these laws. And I'm like, well, sir, you're doing 20 over through a residential area. I have lots of complaints through here. I'm going to issue you a citation for speeding. And you say, no, I'm not giving you a name. I'm not giving you my name or any ID because I don't have to. I don't follow state laws. I'm not doing commerce. So how do I address that situation?
There is laws that infract on other people's complete safety and their own happiness, and that is exactly why a law enforcement is obviously there. It's for specific tort crimes and
So if I stopped you in that situation, you weren't paying attention, whatever, you're doing 20 over, and you're like, oh crap, I thought the speed limit was 35 or 45, I'm doing 55, but it's actually 25. All right, sir, well, we've had a bunch of complaints. I am going to issue you a summons for speed today. And you're going to say, well, no, I'm not giving you my name. And then obviously the problems are really going to escalate from there, right?
Well, this usually does. This is usually where supervisors come out. Obviously, depending on how the officer wants to handle the situation, is the person immature? Are they actually awarded?
I promise you, in the state of Maine, if you get stopped for speeding and they don't want to give you a ticket, the officer's going to demand an identification.
Exactly.
This is where you're going to run into problems of not having a driver's license and that. And 99.9% officers are going to enforce the state law, which I know is kind of where you're trying to go with all this. And I just think that's what you got to go bigger than just individual officers asking them not to enforce Maine's laws. It'd be nice if you could really get something, in the legislature, reference the stuff you're talking about, not in commerce, with all the proper things going on that you could.
There has to be state laws that were existing that did not deprive people's rights before the legislation that now exists that acts as though every single right truly is a crime. That everything you literally are doing is acting as a criminal aspect within the Department of Transportation, or because
those violations aren't criminal; they're civil violations. But obviously, once if it escalates, they turn into criminal.
And again, while laws are still applied to other individuals, what gives also a police officer rights to do the same thing when we see these things, unless there isn't a complete actual emergency. So let's say.
Well, you're going down. You haven't answered my question.
Okay, go ahead.
Road, and I appreciate that, but you haven't answered. If I stop you for speeding for 20 over residential areas, serving the citizens, and you don't want to give me.
Yeah, how would I deal with this situation? I think that's a fantastic question. I'm actually trying to ponder in my brain now the solution of the situation, which is like.
I know it's easy. It's easy in people's minds to say, "Well, the police are just harassing and stop me for a plate light out or something," and it's led to all this. But that's not always the case.
No.
Violations that go on.
Well, a violation is still a loss and injury or harm to a particular right or contract in some way. And this is where, again, I think anybody that's trying to operate the same way that I do, it's to keep my money so I can maintain myself and all my credentials necessary. If I operate in a business capacity, I will go through all those procedures by law in the same exact way that
but again, the question is you're not doing commerce, you're maintaining your own property, but you're speeding, or your safety violations are so egregious you get stopped by the police. You're unsafe, you're speeding. How do I address you?
To me, this is going by somebody that doesn't respect the law. Because if there's a speed limit on the road, it's created for your safety, no matter what.
So are you saying if you are speeding because you didn't respect the law, now you should have to give me your name and identification?
I mean, within those variables, so now it's whether he's a part of that jurisdiction and should he be tried, or was there an injured party? So now you'd have to ask yourself, was there an injured party? So let's say you pull...
No injured party, just driving 20 over through a residential area where we can get in complaints.
Okay, then, yeah, I mean, I think that, I see where you're going with this. You're saying that somebody feel that once they choose not to give you the consent of the ID itself, which then is to charge, how do we get them within the same jurisdiction to then charge in tribunal or appellate courts, is what you're saying, basically?
Yeah, I'm saying this is a real life situation, and how are we going to deal with it?
Okay, so people, all right, do you believe that if you give him a warning after you pull him over and you tell him that there's complaints of the situation, you recognize and appreciate his right to do things, but he's putting himself and other people completely at risk? And if he's going to continue...
And like I told you, we're probably 15-to-1 warnings to summonses. So that's very possible. Now, let's just say, officer, I am going to give you a warning, but I'm going to log this warning in my system so that if you get stopped again next week, the officer will know you've already had a warning and you'll get a ticket next time for sure. No, sir, I'm not giving you an ID. I'm not for commercial.
By law, if you're being stopped, from what I've heard, you have to, one, at least give your address and your name. At least your first name and an address of some sort. Not a social security number, not a driver's license, your name. Okay? And then...
For main law, yes, you have to provide it. I know what you mean, but yes. If I'm going to write you a summons, I need to know who you are, because you could be giving me a fake name. I don't want to have somebody else take the summons.
Well, if I tell you my name and your obligation is to pull me over to issue me a ticket, one, I think that's the police officer's idea to ask himself: was there a tort crime that took place? Is there a victim? Was somebody killed, injured? Is there actually an injured party?
I think you're setting a standard way too high if someone has to be killed or injured before the police can take any action.
Well, I believe in tort crimes and in contract crimes. So, like, let's say, okay,
saying you can drive through that neighborhood at 25 over, as long as you don't kill anybody, you're totally good.
Another thing, and I think let's get to the brass tacks here. I have nothing against a child growing up and then learning that in the state of Maine, driving is a privilege, and then reading the Bible of the Motor Vehicle Code, or the you know what I'm talking about, the manual to become the motor driver's manual for the educational standards to be able to... I read it myself like 3 times, okay? And then because of my childhood and I believe of being kind of targeted and trying to paint me as a bad reputation, I had all these crazy fines against me. And even when I went to go pay them, they still would come up with new ones. That's old news, though. That doesn't even matter. That's irrelevant. But now that I'm older and totally mature and responsible and cognitive and competent, none of those really matter when it comes down to now understanding the difference between... Because a lot of people don't know the things that I know. So if they don't know that there's a difference between a 14th Amendment citizen and a state national, then why would they know the difference between driving and privately traveling? That would actually be up to the officer, not the person or the individual who's operating or living freely as he may. Does this make sense?
Right.
Like, let's say I
get your entire argument. Mine is real life. If this person, not everybody that thinks like you are operates that way does everything by the book, unfortunately. So if somebody is speeding excessively or anything along those lines, they are going to be asked for an ID by an officer, and they need to provide one for the law, and it's going to be enforced. That's why I just think you're going to go at a bigger level, higher level than individual officers. But you didn't really answer me on how I would address you.
How would you address the situation? Okay. Well,
I got somebody calling this black sports cars going through our neighborhood every day, speeding. So I go out and help the citizen. I set up 25 over residential area. I stop you. I walk up. I had you speeding in the neighborhood. It's speed limit's 25, and you thought it was 45. Well, we get a lot of complaints, sir. Can I see your identification? My name's Seneca. That's all I'm giving you. I don't have to follow your laws. Well, sir, you're speeding 25 miles an hour through a residential area. We have complaints. I need to do my job and address it. My name's Seneca. I don't answer questions. So how's the police officer going to do from there?
Okay. So, obviously, I can see what you're saying here. I totally can. So, how would you handle it? Well, this is an individual that obviously does not respect you. He does not respect the law that is permitted between any kind of safety for others, whether they be...
right. I mean, he may not have an outward disrespect. Maybe he's playing on his phone or not paying attention, but regardless, he committed the violation.
Yep.
No question about that. But
yep.
But now it's, my name's Seneca, I don't answer questions. You need to leave me alone. You're harassing me, you're a tyrant. So
okay.
I'm helping the citizens here who are complaining about speeders in your neighborhood. You're a tyrant, stop harassing me, I don't answer questions. So how is the police officer supposed to handle that?
Yeah, I can see where you have to, as a law enforcement officer, which is actually a part of the statutes and the generalizations of the state of Maine, means an officer. So a law enforcement officer means a person.
I don't want to arrest you. This is a simple civil violation that we'd like to address, but once it turns into no, I'm not providing ID, all of a sudden it just escalates everything, unfortunately, too far. And then maybe when I'm still talking to you, say I'm done, and you drive off.
So this is totally different than registration and license. This is now, because I could be doing 15 under the speed limit just to make sure that I'm safe and still get pulled over. And because I'm not licensed and registered, I'm kidnapped. They're taking my property.
I got your point.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying 100%.
So on the level of within, I'm not even going to call them even traffic violations. I'm going to say that, there's a thing called the flow of traffic. So if on a highway it's marked 60 and people are doing 70.
You're getting away from my question again. You always stray off. And I know what you mean. It's all the time for doing 60.
I'm trying to give you hypothetical situations like you're doing with me. Because you're giving me a scenario that really happened. The guy's doing 25 miles an hour over the speed limit. You're getting complaints, and now you have to go take care of the situation. So yes, I'm going to pull this individual over. I'm going to let him know that he is violating public and safety violations, whether he wants to believe it or not. He doesn't have the right to put other people in danger. So while you are okay, so then... Yep, I would let him know I'm writing you a ticket and I'm giving it to you on a presentment. You are going to have to take this to court. If not, the judge will issue out a warrant one way or another. And I do need your name by law. Because so you tell him you are in a lawful arrest. This is not a detainment. You are being lawfully arrested. Because they'll ask you if I'm in a custodial arrest of being detained. Yes, you're being detained. Okay, well then what is the probable cause or reasonable suspicion that I have or committed a crime? If he does not believe that speed limits are put on not just state, but also it's not just the federal level. It's upon the actual nation. It's to be respected.
So straight up, if I stopped you, let's just say you absolutely weren't paying attention, you're unfamiliar with the roads, sir, you're doing 25 over in this residential area.
Yep.
Run your identification and stuff. What are you going to tell the police officer? Straight up, honestly.
I'm going to tell him you can run my name. I'll give you my names. There's no warrants. I exist within the system as this individual as a national. Okay. I respect you.
So you would give your actual name and date of birth?
Yeah, I would. I don't know about my date of birth, but I would give my name. At least my name, and I would tell you my address. I live inside myself, but there's a place that I get like mail. I might tell you where my legal... Or I believe that if you're...
I just need to know it's you. Like, because people give us fake names all the time. They end up getting their buddy, cousin, sister license suspended.
So
or, you know,
the Maine State Nationals, I had to go and create my own passport identification. I had to mail it all in. I'm on record. They're creating a credentials card. I then have to go to the process of getting a national Maine plate created so that if it does say like peace and it is a Maine national, it says not for hire. It does have numbers on it, and you can run it and it will pull up my name and my face. And I actually will have a credentials card and carry with me. But what I believe within the level of like contracting and choosing to contract is going to be based off the sole individual on how you see the crime took fit as a law enforcement officer. Because like dealing with contracted and commercial activity is then different than dealing with an actual crime of watching somebody beat up.
I totally understand your point, and I will speak to my people and say, hey, this is where they're going with this is what they believe, just to give everybody more knowledge about where you're coming from. I'm assuming you're calling based on the incident from last night.
Yeah.
So, and I will certainly educate. You know, honestly, as a guy's not going to enforce the traffic laws, probably they still are, but at least give some education where you're coming from, and that you guys, you know, I will certainly do that for you. But I totally understand what you mean on the...
We just respect the authority so much that I've met people that are cocky, and they're going to, just like there's a bad police officer, there's going to be a bad civilian. There's going to be a bad national. There's going to be somebody who thinks they're above the law. Nobody's above the law. That's the rule of law, number one. But so to me, if I believe that I have some kind of authority that can elevate me. Now, I've seen people do this, like they're traveling down a highway or an open road. It's like 60, 70 miles an hour. There's nobody on the road. They're doing like 100. And then a police officer pulls them over. They hand him all the paperwork. And I don't know whether the guy wanted to deal with him or not, but he just let him go. And they're like, that's a successful, you know, no stop, just let that individual go. And I think that just as a police officer has to operate as his own discretion, we as civilians and all of us, especially people that uphold and respect the law, need to operate at our discretion at all times. At all times. We need to be more aware. But again, my level of awareness is different than your both of our levels of awareness seem to be very similar in comparison to the other people that we're trying to refer to. Like, I'll give an example. Let's say you try to go home tonight and have a conversation with your wife or your family about this conversation. It's going to be like talking about aliens and another planet. They're not going to understand it. Does this make sense, Andrew? Say that again? You're kind of breaking up there. Hello? Okay, I lost him. Yeah, you know what? I think there has to be an emergency. An emergency. I'm trying to call him back. Yes. Yeah, we got disconnected. I don't know what happened there. So here's what I was thinking. If somebody's doing 20 over right away, what is the emergency? Because obviously there has to be an emergency. If there's not, it's ridiculous. If somebody's speeding, it's to literally be completely, they're not operating peaceably. Because no matter how you...
I want you to also know that when you get that version from that national, like your buddy or, you know, someone, they're like, hey, I'm getting harassed by the police. They may not share the whole story with you on why they were stopped. So
well, I was stopped with my friend by the police officer, and I was telling him what to say, and the guy was literally shaking like a leaf. He almost pissed himself. And then the police officer literally was trying to rip the door open, and I was like, dude, wow. I was like, you know what, take it. I was like, and he ended up opening the door. He you know, ended up giving in, and then filed. They didn't just file charges. They like towed his vehicle away. His wife and children were in the car crying. It was completely traumatic. I was also talking to the police officers.
Unfortunately, that's what you're going to do. I mean, per the main law, those are crimes. Not to have a driver's license, to be unregistered over 150 days, and that potentially can happen.
Listen, I'm not arguing. I'm not going to argue whether that was right or wrong because I can't go back in time. I can't. All I know is that, when you look at a police officer that's supposed to be a model citizen, and when somebody is really actually again, these laws were created for the 14th Amendment U.S. citizens that were freed in 1871, that after 1933, everybody became bankrupt, and then now they're using everyone in their birth certificate and everything they do as a tax and a charge to pay for the bankruptcy of America. And
sure. I'm following you. You've made this point a bunch of times, and I promise you I will pass it on to the guys, what your theory is and, where you're going with it. Again, I can't make any promises. No one's going to enforce the traffic laws in the state, but at least maybe they'll have a little more knowledge on where you're coming from.
Okay, because if I'm operating,
that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if they do that, I'm going to bring up all the laws that I possibly can, and it would be nice if the officers also knew their own qualified immunity, knowing that the USC 241, 242 that secures the rights, and one of them is the free right to travel and an automobile to be unmolested, and these Supreme Court rulings that is actually saving people and statutes, even though it says that in some of them if they aren't in harmony of the Constitution to protect people, but yet converting rights, because an ex post facto law, remember I had stated that in our first conversation, was about ex post facto laws and the Bill of Attainders in the Constitution protected by 1820, and one of the ex post facto laws, so it says, after the fact, by an act or fact occurring after some previous act or fact, and relating thereto by subsequent matter the opposite of ab initio. Thus, a deed may be good ab initio, or if invalid at its inception, may be confirmed by matter ex post facto. So I was like, that's strange. But then when you go to ex post facto law, it says, a law passed after the occurrence of a fact or commission of an act which retrospectively changes the legal consequences or relations of such fact or deed. By Constitution, United States, Article 110, the states are forbidden to pass any ex post facto law. In this connection, the phrase has a much narrower meaning than its literal translation and would justify and will appear from some. So if you go down, it basically says a statute which changes punishment which may be imposed for a crime, therefore committed is ex post facto, only if it prescribes or permits imposition a greater sentence. And then it starts to go down to where it basically is saying anything that turns a right into a crime is an ex post facto one. And it's like a retrospective laws divesting vested rights are impolitic and unjust, but they are not ex post facto laws within the meaning of the Constitution of the United States. So that's one where the speed limit comes in, because it's divesting rights are impolitic and unjust. So is the speed limit unjust? No, it's not. It's just. It protects people from rolling off the road, killing children, or if you're going too fast and you don't know, the Department of Transportation set up the speed limit because they knew that if you at certain conditions or times of the road at a certain speed might roll off the road, but the perfect speed limit is to keep everybody safe. That's why we have the government. So then it says,
if I stop one of you folks for speeding, do you feel like they should have to give an ID and be held accountable for it, or no?
I think if it's criminal speeding, 20 over, then I think that, yeah, they should be pulled over and they should be asked.
Criminal is 30 over, and anything under that is civil. Most states 29 over. Should be held accountable for that?
I believe that in my personal opinion, in the safety and respecting the law, that if you are driving 30 over, right away you're pulling me over, I'm either trying to race somewhere because somebody's in danger, my wife is pregnant.
Speak for the people. I'm telling you, the person was on the phone. I know you want to make excuses, but let's just say the guy's on his phone not paying attention. 29 over, and I stop him in a residential area where we've had complaints. Sir, you are getting a speeding ticket today.
So this is a reoccurring situation. He's on the phone.
I don't answer questions.
He's not answering questions. Well, then that's fine. I'm going to write you up. So does he have a license plate?
Probably not. I don't even care about that. I want to write him a speeding ticket.
So you want to write him a speeding ticket? Because
my name is Seneca. I don't answer questions. Seneca, I can't identify just because your name Seneca. I'm going to need more information. Nope, I don't answer questions.
Yep.
Where do you think that's going to go?
Well, it's going to go where, I mean, obviously, you know, it's going to get aggressive. So I'm trying to think of how would you handle the situation? So how would you?
You need to provide a.
How would you expect? How about we flip the script and you tell me how has the situation ever gone before? I would like to hear your thesis of how you'd like it to be handled or in a respectable way. Because you are a law enforcement officer. This is your job. This really is your job. This is your description. So if
I get it. I've been doing it for 20 years. Thank you for reminding me.
That's amazing. Congratulations, you're amazing. I love having this conversation with you too. You're really a true warrior of the Constitution and respecting the people. So let's say you find yourself in this situation, okay? You've had multiple calls in the area. That's what you said. Also, I'm not paying attention because I'm on my cell phone and I'm being irresponsible and I'm doing 20 miles over the speed limit. So let's say you're in the situation and I'm now a punk who's choosing not to identify myself and I'm saying I don't answer questions and I'm not respecting you in any way, or whether you want to write me a ticket or not, or handle the situation civilly. Let's say you want to be a real adult.
Respect has nothing to do with it. You're going to be required to provide, to identify yourself. And when you say, my name's Seneca, I'm not answering questions, then now you're violating the law, which you can be arrested for. Give you multiple opportunities just to provide the ID. So it's just a speeding violation. Doesn't need to go to a crime.
Okay, so how would you handle the situation if let's say I didn't want to give you the ID. I asked for your supervisor to come out there. I don't believe I violated a crime, or at least I ask you to at least, acknowledge whether I'm in an emergency. Let's say that. But you did not say that. You said I have multiple complaints and I've been speeding up and through the neighborhood. So this is a different scenario, Officer Adams.
That's right. We can play a million scenarios, but honestly, I would be more entertained to chat with you the rest of my shift, but I have a ton of stuff to do. But I'm going to give you my word. I'm going to pass on to my folks.
Can at least tell me how you would handle the situation.
If someone's refusing to identify when I want to write them a
yes,
ticket,
exactly.
Yep. I just chat like I am with you, sir. I'm not judging, but I need your ID. That's just the way it is. You're speeding. You're committing a violation on the roadway.
So I tell you, listen, I get it, and you know what? I respect what you're doing out here. I'm not going to do it again. I totally respect what you're doing. So let's say I am being...
The respect has nothing to do with it. We've had multiple complaints, 20 plus over. I'm giving you a ticket.
Then I need my ticket. Then there has to be a level of where, okay, so if I have a license plate, then you're going to run the name on the license plate anyways and write the ticket to the person that's in the plate and then just leave it to that. Because anybody that gets a presentment...
No, not necessarily. I'm going to need to make sure the operator can't just go off a license plate. Other people drive, family members' vehicles, friends' vehicles. So I need to positively identify the driver.
Again, this is where an individual is either going to hand you, so I see what you're saying, conducting commercial activity or practicing and exercising the law, and how do you file a charge against somebody if they actually are violating some kind of traffic? So you believe that, so is this a real crime though? I would then ask...
It's a civil violation.
It's a civil violation, so it's a contract violation. Then I would ask, where's the contract that I signed into? So
even in federal speeding laws are federal as well, and you should need to respect those.
Well, I'm going to talk to the assembly because no matter what, every single one of those guys are following all the laws under Regulation Z, which is under the Truth in Lending Act, and the bankers to be able to have the Regulation Z plates. So that's following the law to be able to get the plates in the first place. No one wants to violate these speed limits. That's the truth. If anybody's doing it, they're abusing the law and they deserve whatever's coming to them. That's the truth. If I'm not violating any, let's say I'm doing 5 over or a couple over, and
you've changed it. So let's get back to my scenario. You provide any identification.
Yeah, I would expect you to call out as many law officers as possible to figure out the situation so you can identify me.
There's nothing to figure out. If you're going to provide identification, I don't know who you are.
Then how do you handle the situation? I would like to know how you handle the situation. I'm not going to identify myself. And so what is your next move?
Step out. You're under arrest.
Okay, so then I choose not to step out of the vehicle or the automobile. Then the next step would be what? To smash out a window?
I generally have pretty good rapport with people, so I don't use force. It could go that way.
It could go that way?
The person.
Okay, so let's say it's me. I'm saying I don't want to do it, and I choose not to comply. I don't believe I did anything wrong. And take in mind now, this is the same scenario. Many complaints. I'm on the phone. I'm 20 over the speed limit. What is the scenario? How would you officiate?
That's not what you're being arrested for. You're being arrested for failure to provide identification.
Okay, so it's not arrested for speeding, even though you have me for speeding. Right. That's interesting.
Right, that's a civil violation. You don't get arrested for 25 over. It's got to be 30 over.
So really, I could tell you that I'm really technically not violating anything to be arrested, but now you want, while you say that that's a crime, I then would, seek, so what would be the way around that? Yeah, exactly. This is probably
Don't speed, I guess, would be the way around it, but I honestly, sir, I gotta go, and I am enjoying this conversation, and I will pass it on. It's been good chatting with you. I've learned a lot. But I got a ton of stuff to do.
I'm gonna ponder this. I'm gonna ponder this, and if I'll probably give you a call back.
Do that because it's not always you getting stopped for no license plate. There's 4-ball tires. There's speeding. There's reckless operation, and then we get made to look like the bad guy. That's not the case all the time. You know what I mean?
I truly understand that, and this is where I think that Americans need to take it upon their own self to understand how to maintain their own automobile, what are safe regulations and customs. Like I said, in Florida, you don't need any of those things. There is no inspection laws. There is none of those things, and they seem to be doing just fine. And that's the truth.
Stuff doesn't rust out. Stuff doesn't rust out down there.
I agree. And not only that, they don't have mountain terrain where the road goes completely at an 80-degree angle and then all of a sudden back down a huge giant hill and ice and all these other
things. You will agree, some folks that subscribe to what you're saying are just doing it because they don't want to pay.
Absolutely.
Abusing it, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. You know. So it's not that I am against what you're trying to say. It's what I think is that there has to be a balance between. Well, right now, what the main assembly is doing is we're creating a jural community so we can also operate in a courtly fashion. That if somebody really does violate laws and rules, nobody's just going to get away with murder or whatever. You know what I mean? There has to be law and order, but it should be in the hands.
I understand your theory. If you get stopped for no license plate, right? You've done nothing wrong but no license plate. But I want you to talk to your people about what if you are speeding. What if you are committing a safety violation? And how do you address it with the police? Then a legitimate violation. It's not just a license plate.
Again,
speeding, you know
if you study the real laws, everybody's under this thing called a parens patriae, okay? A parens patriae, which is given the state the ownership and parenting of all people that exist within the state without them realizing it. So that means that they are actually under the authority of the state because of this law that's passed. So then when they hit 21 under Minnesota Rule 220, they're to go back and no longer become a ward of the state. They're now a competent adult. So like when you you take your birth certificate, you get it certified, your live birth record, it gets a seal on it and all these things. And so whenever you go to court, you are actually the administrator over the name. So then, therefore, you do go to court, but you handle in court in different ways under the Articles of a Common Law Court. If I in doing something,
I don't really have time to
okay,
dive into
you know,
this.
you know what? This is fun. I would love to talk to you again. If you have time, you know, maybe we can set up an appointment or something.
You have my number. It's my work cell, so you won't bother me if I'm not working. If you get bored time, I work nights. Feel free to give me a call if I'm free. We'll chat it up some more.
Perfect. I really appreciate this. Truly, I really do. And thank you for your time. Seriously.
No worries. It was interesting and learning. So have a good night, sir.
You too. Take care. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.